to the Crooked Table podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yannis Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table podcast. This is Rob. On this show, we democratize the film criticism conversation by bringing on fans and critics alike to dig into their personal connection. And honestly, I just want to skip to the fact that we're talking about Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Finally, if you all knew the journey it took to get to this point, I've been jokingly behind the scenes calling this the Cursed Podcast. And today's guest, Ryan McQuade, I think is totally on board with that nickname. So thank you for braving the curse.
Yeah, no, it's this is the Cursed Podcast. It's been an unexpected journey. Oh wait, that's a different fantasy franchise.
Yes.
But no, we're finally here. We're going to talk about it. And thank you for having me back on, Rob.
Yeah, of course. So before we get into the Harry Potter franchise as a whole, Ryan, tell people a little bit about who you are, what you're up to, and what people can look forward to from you in the future.
Well, I am a film critic for various places like Awards Watch and Film Speak and Awards Radar, formerly of Awards Circuit. I'm also the associate editor over at In Session Film, and I do a bunch of different articles over there. I'm also the podcast host over there of the Extra Film podcast with my co-host Jay Ledbetter, where we talk about a lot of small films, indies, or classics that aren't covered on our main show by JD Durant and Brendan Cassidy. And then I am also the co-host, or I'm also the host of Chasing the Gold, which is the Oscar podcast over there, which is sort of a roundtable discussion about the Academy Awards. And then we have staff members that write pieces alongside myself about it under that same banner too. So basically I'm like everywhere, Rob. And then I've been on this show before. You probably heard the Phantom Thread episode, Singing in the Rain episode. It's my third appearance. And I'm very humbled to be on the last episode of your series here, talking about a really interesting film in the canon that is Harry Potter.
Yeah, it's not only the last one here of the Harry Potter franchise, because I don't count the Fantastic Beasts movies as films that actually exist. I feel like most people don't.
No, they don't exist. Those are just like Warner Brothers saying, let's waste some money in November. Shall we?
Exactly.
So,
but for me personally, like this has felt like a really strange time to be devoting a whole series to Harry Potter. So the fact that I've made it to the end, and that you're willing to come on to talk about it, it's been a little tricky getting a guest for this one.
I don't know why. Why would it be tricky to get a guest on in this climate
for Harry Potter?
Talk about Harry Potter.
Yeah, people don't want to come on and talk about how much they love Harry Potter and how genius the series is, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, but it couldn't be because of anybody behind the scenes, the creative of any of this. It couldn't be because of that, Rob.
No, Daniel Radcliffe didn't do anything to us. I don't understand.
Yeah, I think it might be time to talk about we've been hating on Emma Watson way too much. I mean, like this is getting out of hand. Sure, she is the wink link in Little Women, and sure, she wasn't the best Belle. She did auto-tune, but like, come on, guys, she's not the problem in this franchise. Is that not what we're talking about, Rob? We're not talking about
no. We're talking about the Rupert Grint hate train.
Oh,
right?
That's why he didn't get his due, because he's clearly the best of the trio. That makes sense. Why he doesn't have 9 Oscars already just for playing Ron itself. I mean, it's sort of baffling. No, I mean, obviously, Rob, we're talking about She Who Shall Not Be Named. Even though, I mean,
everybody knows who it is. Yeah, and you pointed out that we were recording this on the day that Elliot Page came out as transgender, which feels strangely right, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's
for this podcast it does.
For this podcast it does. As this Cursed Podcast, I'm like, sure. I mean, clearly we're not on She Who Must Not Be Named's side. No. And when I announced the series and when we started it, I mean, I was mentioned to you before we started recording, the first guest on the Sorcerer's Stone episode has since come out as non-binary. So clearly the whole conversation with this franchise has changed dramatically over the course of 2020. And it's become sort of a metaphor for this year itself for me that I'm like, I just want to crawl out of this. Can I make it to the other side? Can I get to the end? And it's the fact that I'm here. I'm like, kind of giddy with excitement, like, oh, it's happening. We're almost done.
Yeah. But first, before we continue, just congratulations, or we're so proud of Elliot Page and the courage it shows to come out and even in this climate where there is a lot more acceptance, and the world is still a very mean, cynical, nasty place, and for the amount of love and outpour that we saw today was extraordinary. I mean, like 1 million likes on Twitter within 5 hours. That's extraordinary for any post. And I just pray to God I do not see tomorrow morning and I wake up across the pond. Meanwhile, across the pond in Britain, in part of like her tea, and she sees this and she goes, absolutely, ape shit. On this news, because every time she tweets, I mean, it makes anyone that likes this franchise cringe at the fact that like they have emotional connection. And it really is, I think, the ultimate test, Rob, of separating the artist from the art. Right. Because of the fact that you and I grew up with this, like not even just the movies, the books. Yeah. Too. So like it really just pushes you to a limit whenever she just opens up her mouth. And it almost feels like she's ruining her own thing and every time she does.
Kind of. And she keeps doubling down on it too. It's like she'd say something and people are like, ooh, that doesn't come off right. And she's like, well, here's something worse. And then we're all like, oh, really? Like learn, like, it's like,
it's a hateful lasagna. You know what I mean? Because you put the first layer down.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you're like, okay, come on. Like, you can't continue making a lasagna like this. Like, this is improper at all. You know what I mean? And then she continues to make the same layers, only they're terrible and then she serves it to you on a plate and you're like, I am not hungry for this whatsoever. Get your hateful, lasagna out of here. And so she's basically the worst Italian chef is what we're saying in pop culture.
Yeah, of course, naturally. But it's like we're in the midst of this cancel culture. And I think there's a difference between someone that makes a mistake and tries to do better and someone that sticks to their guns, digs in their heels. And she's like, no, this is very important to me. This is the hill I will die on. And I feel like that's kind of where people are at with her at this point.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's at this, it's at just the worst point, but that doesn't, but then I say that, and I do love this franchise, and I do love these books, and I have my connections to it. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
So I mean, I am excited to talk about this, but I'm also excited for you to sort of put this to bed, so then you don't feel that guilt anymore.
Yeah,
that we all do.
Like I'm committed to this, guys. I'm committed to it. Stop halfway through. Yeah,
because like when this started coming out, and I started seeing that your episodes were coming out, I'm like, oh man. I'm glad Rob hasn't asked me. And then you asked me and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to leave him cold. Like I'll help my buddy out. You know what I mean? Like,
but we're not going to talk about it without addressing the
there's no
transphobic elephant in the room.
I mean, it is. It's extremely. It's growing bigger by the day, and it's not
staring right at me.
It's just awkward as hell. Yeah. And because, like I said, we're living in a world where it's both simultaneously we are at the most tolerant and most accepting that we've ever been in history, and yet we're still not all the way there because there's still terrible, terrible, terrible things going on out in the world, and people that continuously devoid that progress from going forward. And you would think, with the imagination that this woman has, that she wouldn't also be this stubborn when the science is there, people's actual feelings are there. Like there's a whole ton of things that you can complain about in these books too. I won't even get to what the Asian representation in the books and stuff and the names for it, which is
right.
bad. But I mean, I feel like we should have also seen this coming, Rob. Like the whole Dumbledore is gay thing, and her not really like laying down the blueprint for that ever. And just like that, remember like a couple of years ago, like that was the big headline, like breaking news, Dumbledore is gay. And like you have to comb through every single conversation he's ever had. And it's like, because she's like, it's in the text, it's clear. And you're like, what?
No, it's not.
It's not. No, now you're making this like, I mean, great that he is gay. Cool. Right. But you never laid any groundwork for that or never celebrated it in any of your books. Like you never, now like in Fantastic Beasts movies, like Grindelwald's like sort of his boyfriend, I guess.
I don't even think, from what I've heard, I guess I saw the first one and was not into it, and then heard bad things about Crimes of Grindelwald that didn't even bother. But from what I understand, it's not even really explicitly stated in those movies that Dumbledore is gay. I'm like, this is your chance to do that, and you're still like, yeah, but I want credit for having an LGBT main character, but not actually illustrating his LGBT status, which feels like something she would try and do to get a free pass, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like she's trying to get woke points and she didn't get them. So then she's gone to the other side of the pendulum and be like, I hate trans people. And you're just like, oh my God, like what the hell is going on? So yeah, that's Warner Brothers mess. And they've obviously made enough money off of her and will continue to do it. I'm looking forward to the reboot on HBO Max of this in a long form series down the road. But until then, I'm just excited to talk about Deathly Hallows Part 2.
Yeah, exactly. So before we get into the movie itself, what is your experience with this franchise? When did you first come across it, and how did you react when the movie started coming out?
So I was a little bit late to the book game. I will admit that. I think when like early 90s, right? Early 90s was when the first book came out, or like
90, I think like 97,
like 97.
Like
so I'm like
there,
5.
Yeah.
So I'm like 5 years old. You know what I mean? You know me. I'm already reading at a scholarly level, right?
Right, of course.
I'm getting a scholarship to King's College, right? I shouldn't brag.
Yeah,
Damn, I'm used to this, Amish, right? But no, I was still a little too young to read the books when they first came out, but I think it was around Goblet of Fire, and that was when sort of the movies were announced, right? When like they were already like 3 books ahead, the movies were being announced, and then that's was like, okay, I want all the books. So I got all the books because in my household, which I think should be universal for anyone's household, if a child wants to see the movie that is being adapted from a novel or a kid's book or anything, the parents should oblige them by giving them the book first and telling them they cannot see the movie until they finish the book. Because that's an advocacy for literacy, everybody, and also too, then it gives them even more of an emotional attachment to the characters, right? And that's what my parents did a ton when I was a kid, and it made me sort of really, invest in sort of adaptating, novels and also finding like ones that are really good at adapting, but also changing things up, as well as, as well as also to like completely changing everything and it being for the worst possible reasons. So when it came to Harry Potter, I read all 4 books in a matter of like a month, like the first 4. And I loved them. I was literally always carrying them around. And then the movies came out, and I was just, I mean, it's two events in my life as a child that are so significant are Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, because they literally came out the same year, the first films in their franchise. And I mean, those are, I think, the equivalent of Star Wars, you know, the original Star Wars for our generation. In that, you know, it's sort of, I remember seeing the first film for both of them, especially seeing Sorcerer's Stone or Philosopher's Stone, whichever way you prefer, in the theater, because it was my mom's birthday. And these all came out in November for the most part around my mom's birthday. So we would always go to them. And I remember being in line, because back then, obviously, Rob, you don't have tickets in advance. And if you did have tickets in advance, there's not assigned seats. So you have to get in line an hour and ahead and wait, remember? And you had to wait in line. And
remember movie theaters, everybody?
Remember first of all, remember popcorn? Remember sodas? remember going to the lobby? Yeah. Let's all go to the lobby, right?
I would love to go to the lobby if it were safe to do so.
Remember the floors being really sticky and you don't know why? Is it candy? Is it soda? Is it something else? Like, we'll never know. That's the magic of cinema, kids.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, that was like way back. And then like if a movie sold out, it wasn't like, oh, there's another one showing in like 20 minutes or whatever. You had to wait an hour. You know what I mean? You had to wait 2 hours. You might not even be able to see it that day. You had to buy it for the next day, you know? And Rob, if I could just say one more thing, my theaters were, I think, the most insane way of sort of dividing up a movie calendar, because there was an AMC which had 24 screens and a Regal that had about 16 to 18 screens. Okay. And they were literally a half mile away from each other. Like you go around the block, you know, take a couple lefts and you're there. Right. Or the vice versa. You take a couple of rights and you're there. So what the theater owners, the owners for the AMC and the Regal would do, they would basically do the first ever movie draft where they would divide up the movie calendar. And so you'd go to Lord of the Rings over at the Regal and you would go to Harry Potter at the AMC. And then they would either swap or they would get the same thing the next year. You never knew. You were not seeing the same theater slates at each one. It was the most fascinating thing I've ever seen in my life. I don't think I've never talked to anybody that's had that experience. I don't know if you.
Yeah, no, I've never. No, not usually the case.
It's kind of, and it's also like not the best thing for business, right? But I guess it's also too. It's like it's sort of like the whole community thing. I don't know. It was a weird thing, and no one's ever explained it to me. but it worked, and it was crazy, and it was cool. And so, I mean, I have so much love and great memories from this series, you know, from many series, because these were the last sort of movies, especially this movie that we're talking about tonight. This was one of the last movies where I had to wait in a actual line to get into the theater. Like, there was not advanced tickets yet, still, where, you know, you could pick your seats out and separate yourself from everybody, like, you know, when we're in a normal sort of 2020 or 2019, I guess you could say, theater experience, right?
Yeah, nothing normal about 2020.
Nothing normal about 2020. But yeah, I mean, so that's why I even though I'm not a fan of all the Harry Potter films, because of adaptation purposes and also filmmaking choices, they hold such reverence because of the fact that they are the franchise of my childhood. Long story short.
Yeah. And that's why before it seemed like a really bad idea. That's why I decided to talk about Harry Potter movies on this podcast, because last year we did Star Wars, and I was like, well, this generation's Star Wars is Harry Potter. So that, you know, was kind of the logical progression. But I'm curious, before we get into this movie, what are your sort of best and worst of the series as far as adaptation or just personal preference, and where does this one sit there?
Well, okay, so in terms of adaptation, I think that the first book is like basically like carbon copy, like, right? Like, I mean, like Chris Columbus just basically had to take the book. He didn't have to take a screenplay to work. Like, he just took the book to work and then but he brought all of like our dreams come true. And low key, nobody really talks about this enough, in that they got John Williams to do the theme for Harry Potter. Like, people really forget that. Like, it is something that it is probably the most underrated theme he's ever made, right? Because people's just, I guess they thought it up in like a Warner Brothers like think tank rather than like go to the master of musical scores. You know? So I think of the first one, I know it's a sort of a controversial opinion, the third book versus the film adaptation. Actually, as much as I think that the third book is my favorite book, Prisoner of Azkaban, it's also my favorite film because they are a little bit different. And yet I love them both as two different entities, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense.
I mean, it's kind of hard to hate on Alfonso Cuarón. You know what I mean? It's hard to hate on a man who is one of the greatest living directors of his time. You know what I mean? And, you know, I like Yates's approach to most of these films. We'll talk about this one tonight. This is actually my second favorite that we'll talk about tonight. And I'm a real big fan, even though I don't like the adaptation because it's such a big novel, and the Half-Blood Prince is a very horny book. Like, that movie, that book is very horny. And I remember also too, like, Entertainment Weekly writing about like, could it be rated R? Because it's a very dark book too. And then that movie decided to go the PG route, but it's like the darkest PG movie I've ever seen in my life. Like, it's right up there with Temple of Doom for being like a PG movie that, like, this has no business being PG. Like, why? Even like the flashbacks with Tom Riddle are dark enough to put this in a PG-13 rating. It's almost like a horror movie. Like, Gambon drinking from the and like yelling at Harry. It's the most terrifying thing to like take a child to that. It's wonderful acting, but I'm like, no. This is a PG-13 movie.
I actually had my wife on that episode on the Half-Blood Prince because she hadn't. She saw these movies a few years ago when I showed them to her. She hadn't seen really all of them. I think she saw maybe one, and she didn't read the books until like last year. She's finally buckled under the pressure. Was like, all right, I guess I should read these. So we talked about that on the episode of how Order of the Phoenix was PG-13 and then Half-Blood Prince is PG, and how it's just like not. I don't know if they were gonna if they were gonna make these PG-13, why not just stick with that rating all the way through to the end?
They could have done more things to make it a little bit edgier too, like the book,
right?
But and then what does frustrate me is that they did go back to what they did with the first film, which is a big adaptation for, basically splitting the last book into two films. And so, for me, I love that because I do think the book, there is like a literal halfway point, and it's right around where I stopped reading for the night, the first night I got the book, which, I mean, Robert, remember going to like Barnes and Noble at midnight and getting this book? Like, name a book you've gone to Barnes, name a book that stayed open long enough for you to be at Barnes and Noble at midnight anymore, because people don't read. It's
or if they do, they download things on their
On the Kindle.
Buy a physical copy.
Like, I don't want to go to the store. Well, they're not going to the store right now, so just
exactly.
My sort of ramblings about that makes no sense during a pandemic. But I remember like sort of right around where they finished, where the things happen at Malfoy Manor and with Dobby and everything. That's sort of where I did in the night of reading. And then I picked it up the next day and finished it because, we were kids and we were psychopaths. That's binge reading, folks. If you can binge read, like you can obviously binge watch. And I like the idea of it because I wish they would have done it. I want like a 4-hour cut, or like I wanted like a 4-hour Goblet of Fire. Like that book is so damn good that it deserves to not be cut with certain things, right? And so I mean, I love every sort of thing about it. I mean, like the books are better than the movies, but the movies have a special place in my heart. I do not like Chamber of Secrets. Coincidentally, this is another thing I did. When this movie came out, when part 2 came out, the Alamo Drafthouse in San Antonio did a 8-movie marathon leading up to the night of the premiere. So we showed up at 5:00 in the morning at the Alamo Drafthouse, and we watched all the movies straight through to the early premiere of the Deathly Hallows Part 2. And I remember the 2 nap points that I took because I took a solid nap during 2 of the movies. It's my least favorites. I took a nap during Chamber of Secrets, and I took a nap during Order of the Phoenix because
those would be those are probably around my least favorites as well. We're pretty in sync with where we kind of rank these films, so that's interesting.
It's when the whole thing with like Umbridge happened, I'm like, okay, I've seen this enough. It's stupid. Let me just go take a nap. And then like Moaning Myrtle stuff, I was like, yeah, I can take a big nap with this. And so, and I'm glad Chris Columbus only did 2 of these, because if he did the whole series, I think it would be insufferable. So yeah, and leading into Deathly Hallows Part 2, I mean, I was on a lot of caffeine, and it was a 3D experience, and I hate 3D, but I still did it anyway. And and so that's kind of where we're at going into this review.
Nice. Perfect setup. So let's listen to a little bit of the trailer for Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 right now.
On this night, join me and confront your fate. We can end this. I never wanted any of you to die for me. Come on, Tom. Let's finish this the way we started it. Together! Only I can live forever.
That's a little bit of the trailer for Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 from 2011, almost a 10-year-old movie, directed, as were the previous 3, by David Yates. So you said that you liked David Yates' approach in general. Do you think the movies made a wise decision just keeping him around for the second half of the franchise, or would you like to have seen some fresh blood thrown in there at some point?
Well, I think I would like some fresh blood thrown more into Fantastic Beasts.
Yes, because that's for sure.
Because I think that those movies are supposed to be more playful than Yates's tone suggests, which is a more serious tone. Like it is a more of these are more adult films, and as they go on, they get darker. And I think the way sort of Caron sets everything up for him in Azkaban, he takes that in sort of, I mean, it almost looks very Fincher-esque at times, the way some of these movies look, and the sort of the dark cinematography aesthetic, of even something like Half-Blood Prince. Like I was watching, I was like, did he sort of like steal okay, he didn't, did he? Okay, sure, whatever. It's like, almost like he sort of stole sort of the grainy quality of it, and I like it. I think it fits perfectly in there, and because these movies turn into a war. You know what I mean? So it's no different than if you watch Lord of the Rings. Those the longer you start watching those movies, they get darker because you're getting more into battle and war and people dying and
closer to Mordor.
Yeah,
literally and figuratively. Yeah.
Literally, you're getting closer to the darkest place on the planet. And I mean, this movie primarily takes place at night, which, I mean, it is one of the best, I think, lit films of all time, because this movie is shot in darkness, and yet you're able to coherently see everything perfectly, beautifully. Personally, to me, if I had a vote in the Academy, one, this movie would have been nominated for Best Picture, because it is one of the best films of 2011, a year that I don't think is as good as people try to say. Oh, it's not that bad. And I'm like, yeah, it's not a great year. Okay. But I would also give Yates a nod for director. I mean, like, this is how you end a franchise. And I think over the last couple of years, we've seen franchises not end so well. And granted, he had a book to sort of guide him, but it could look bad, or they could try to take liberties, or whatever it is. And he is a steady hand at the ship, but he also just takes it and takes all the action and really elevates it. And you see a lot of great visuals on the screen. So I don't think I want to see anybody else. Like, I think Yates is good enough and does a really great job, but yet he's done such a good job. He sort of trapped himself, and he sort of Horcruxed himself into this franchise. And I don't know if anyone's going to be able to get him out unless she keeps tweeting, and then it just ruins the whole franchise.
They just cancel the whole thing. He's like, thank God. He's like, he must have made an unbreakable vow at some point. He must have. Like, if I break this, they'll kill me.
I told you.
But it's also too, I think what's interesting is that this movie, or with the adaptation of Deathly Hallows, they sort of accidentally set a precedent that then Twilight, Hunger Games, all these other YA franchises were like, oh, we could split that in half and make twice the money. And then I think Divergent tried to do that and then just never made the last part.
They never made
it. Just gave up to and they were I think they were supposed to do it as like a TV series show, movie or something. And then they were even like, yeah, nobody cares. Literally nobody cares. Do you think that this is the rare instance where that actually makes sense? Because I feel like it frees this movie up to basically be sort of a 2-hour climax. Like, it's just all like it's so much of it hinges on the end battle, the Battle of Hogwarts, and sort of the struggle, the race against time to get those last few Horcruxes, that I think it kind of works as a standalone too.
Oh, it's pretty damn good. Like, it's one of the best blockbusters of the last decade, easily. I mean, you're talking about a movie that, it is just ripe with momentum. Like, it's a nonstop sort of bullet train all the way to the end. And it has emotional catharsis as well as just, great moments of celebration, of drama, suspense, performances that are just out of bounds that we'll talk about, that are, just, I don't know how you get them in a franchise like this, because I don't think any other franchise has been able to get performances out of their actors and actually cast perfectly. But you mentioned it, Rob. It's sort of, it deserved to be like this because the book is like 800 pages. It's like 1,000 pages or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, they're giant novels, and every detail is put into these two movies. If anything, this is what they should have done the entire series. Like, milk that cow, baby. You know what I mean? Like, just like they should be still making them right now, because of the fact that, they really got it right. And I think they listened to the fans, because the fans for years were like, these movies are good, but you're missing all these details. And then just WB said, fine, we'll give you every detail you want that's in this book. And it's great. You know what I mean? To have that. And the other novels, like, okay, the one that always pissed me off was Hunger Games. And because of the fact that they really just stretched it so it is so stretched that it's just a joke. And I think that's an instance where you sort of cut a lot of her campaigning in the first part, and I think I'm going to say something, and this is as I've been in quarantine, I've been doing a lot of blind spots, and and I truly think one of the greatest cinematic tools we ever had was an intermission. And the reason why I say that is because nowadays we really could have an audience sit there for 15 minutes and think about the twist that just happened. Like, imagine, this is getting into a Hunger Games discussion, but like Peeta's revelation, right? In that he's sort of been turned, or he's like been manipulated. And that's like an hour and a half of a movie, right? And then the second half of the movie is maybe 2 hours, is Mockingjay Part 2. And it's just a 3.5 hour film. You never left, and you just had an intermission, and then you just keep going. That's what should have happened. I should have had to wait a whole nother year to see how it finishes. Twilight's a joke, just in general, because that first movie is again very unnecessary. And then Breaking Dawn Part 2 is the sort of tricks they do in that movie is stupid, and also too, it feels like it's copying this franchise, in that it's like the first film is the sort of somber, meditative art piece, right? Because that's what Deathly Hallows Part 1 really to me is. And then the second film is just balls to the wall action, like a war film, like to just solve everything. And like you said, it's got so much momentum in it that it has to. And that's how the book is designed, and that's how this movie is designed, and it's perfectly well done. So I'm glad that it's that it almost feels like it is its own thing, and yet everybody tried to copy it, and it just wasn't the same.
Well, I think the difference is with Harry Potter, that last novel is so much, it's just all a story. It's all Voldemort, the Horcruxes. There's not a lot of subplots that are disconnected from the main action. So I feel like it either would have had to be like a Cliff's Notes version of itself, which a lot of people feel like Half-Blood Prince ended up kind of being, and compress so much down, or do what they did and have these two sort of complementary halves that together work as a whole piece in the way that something like the Kill Bill movies work, where it's sort of reversed. The first one is a lot more action and style, and the second one is a lot more meditative, more character based, whatever. And here it's just reversed, so that you get that, like you said, that momentum going into the second half, that it's just the three leads rushing to kind of get everything together and meet up with the whole cast in the second half.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's this movie is so good. I mean, it just, right after they bury Dobby, it just goes. It doesn't stop.
And it's also, you get that very grim contrast with the first movie. The first movie starts and it's all this wonder, and it ends with him boarding the train, and he's just like, I'm not going home, not really. And then this starts and he's burying like his most devoted friend, like the closest this franchise has to an innocent.
It's like burying Baby Yoda. Like, folks.
Sort of.
It's like the most. It's like burying BB-8. You know what I mean? It's like it's the most innocent thing in this world, and all it wants to do is be your friend. Yeah, let's kill that. And she who shall not be named did this many years ago, and it just. I mean, this movie, this book has casualties in it that just. I mean, she's a monster. Like killing Dobby and Hedwig in the same
right, I know.
half of a book. You monster! Like, who are you? The signs were there, Rob. The signs were there. Like, we should have known then. Like, this is
we talked about that in the episode on part 1 about how just the death of Hedwig just signals like it's all on the table.
It's almost throwaway too.
Yeah,
like she's like, the owl's dead. What? I need like 4 chapters explaining your process of thinking about that lady.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, what the hell? Like, what has he ever done? Like, it's frustrating. And how did he know? Like, it's like, how did he know to sacrifice himself? This is terrible. Oh,
I know.
Don't get me started again. God,
R.I.P. Hedwig.
R.I.P. Hedwig. Pour one out for him, man. Like, pour that guy.
So what I like about this one is that we get the quick sort of recap of Voldemort with the Elder Wand, which it sounds like was sort of your own natural stopping point, the Malfoy Manor stuff, and then picking it up from there. So that's weird how this sort of happened the same way with the movies.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like that in the book. I don't know about you. I don't know when the last time you read the book, but it does feel like the momentum starts picking up because you start to get a little sleepy in the woods, and and then you get to Malfoy Manor, and that's when it starts picking up. You have this sort of turn with Dobby. You have, obviously, Voldemort getting the wand, and you're just like, oh boy, here we go. And then you're like, let's keep reading, and the stuff at Gringotts is. I mean, just awesome. Like, it's so awesome. Like, I love it. Like, it's quintessential Harry Potter. Like, this group going on sort of an adventure and riding a dragon. Like, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, there's no time to reset. Like, Dobby dies, and they're like, all right, Grip Hook, what up? What are we doing? Yeah. And by the way, more Warwick Davis and everything, please. I love Warwick Davis.
Yeah, Warwick's like great. Like, he can play like such the nicest guy, and then he can play like a mean little bastard.
Well, he plays Flitwick and Grip Hook in this movie, I believe, as well. So exactly.
And then the Ollivander too, like having Ollivander come back around and that's great. I mean, like having him sort of in this like throwaway sort of like moment, and having John Hurt, like R.I.P. John Hurt,
right?
Who was one of the great actors of all time. I mean, this cast is just insanely stupid. Like this. I mean, how Warner Brothers didn't go bankrupt from the call sheet alone, it astonishes me. I mean, and to have John Hurt, who is one of the greatest character actors of all time, in just like a 2-minute scene. That's it. Mm-hmm. It's like, I mean, and yet it means so much to everything. It's great. It's great decision making at Warner Brothers. Cannot deny that.
Yeah, it really brings everything full circle. That's what I love about these last 2 movies, is that pretty much everyone they could get back comes back, and it is pivotal. So it does feel sort of retroactively, I think, as the books were being written, and her just being like, you know what, we could bring the Chamber of Secrets back around. Maybe that was a Horcrux. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it does feel like a book when you're able to bring all these people back. It does feel like, okay, I'm able to bring back this character, that character, all these actors, even if it's just for a scene or not. And maybe they're under contract, maybe we're, whatever. But even if they aren't, like, the fact that they're able to bring everybody back and sort of do this, I mean, it feels very book-like. Like that, I mean, where you're able to just throw a character in there and you don't have to worry about like, oh, they're in Maui for a week. We'll have to wait on the scheduling and all that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think in this one, you really need Ollivander because not only because of it brings the franchise full circle back to when Harry got the wand in the first one, but so much of this movie, and I kind of forget that until every time I rewatch it, so much of this is like wand work. Like there's lots of business with the wand. The whole thing with the Elder Wand and who it belongs to and who it doesn't belong, all of that. All of that is really key to the entire climax. Even though I feel like it's slightly convoluted, I think it's really important that Ollivander is there to really set the table for that.
Yeah, no, it is great because of all the scenes that we saw in the first film, and then just, everything that we see and him sort of, explaining about the wand and it's how all this rest of this film is going to break down. And then of course them starting to go into the core Horcruxes and just, and start wrecking some shop. You know what I mean? Start ripping some soul. You know what I mean? And I love it. And I love also too. I love when they sort of land in the water and Harry starts having the visions of Voldemort, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel they're getting towards the sort of their heightened power. Right, because because Voldemort's getting so strong, and Harry can feel it, and it really is the testament to Radcliffe's performance here. This is the best he is in the franchise. I mean,
I think so too,
and show what an actor he's going to be beyond this franchise as well. And so, I mean, yeah, it's the whole beginning of this movie just sort of sets it up. It's beautiful. And then like the score too, it just is like, it's all very, Desplat does just a great job of then setting it up, and then, okay, we're going into it. And then everything's sort of like got a momentum, you know what I mean? And, and we got to get this Horcruxes right now. And it's just a testament to great storytelling, this whole thing.
Yeah, we get some more fun with Polyjuice Potion, as I like to call it. Yeah. And then the whole Gringotts set piece very, very early on, which it seems like was the inspiration for a Universal Studios attraction over here in Florida. So, I think that's really fun in and of itself, just as a set piece.
Rob, you wrote that last week, right? You went on the ride last week because it's open right now.
I did not. It is open, I believe. I've seen I have people on my Facebook who are like, we're going to Disney. And I'm like, why?
Look, and they're wearing masks, no hands. No hands, everybody.
There are no lines. I was like, well, yeah, of course there are no lines. You shouldn't be there. Nobody should be there. Just a tangent. It's insane. It's insanity to me how much people in Florida are just like, that's over. We're not paying attention to that anymore. It's that's a totally separate conversation.
I totally get you. Our head over at In Session Film, JD Duran, he lives in Florida too, and so we have other writers there, and there's no mistaking who continues to lose worst state in the United States, and it's Florida. Like they are proud champions of that monocle for sure.
Yeah, yes, we are. But yeah, so. I did notice that I think it's in the Gringotts escape scene that Harry does the Imperio curse, which is an unforgivable curse, which I noticed at one point he does on the goblin, on the other guy, I forget his name, the other goblin that works in the bank. So I think that's sort of a sign of just that the main heroes have to get their hands a little bit dirty as they kind of corner Voldemort. I did that a lot in one of the other episodes too. I kept mixing them up, and I was like, well, they're kind of interconnected, so it makes sense.
Wow. Well, he is a monster by the end of this movie, so that does make sense. Like, well, that's the other fun thing here is that we meet Aberforth, his brother, randomly, and he basically points out how kind of shady Dumbledore's been for 7 movies. Like, yeah, you don't really know, you didn't really know my brother at all. You don't know what, these movies really have Harry reckon with the fact that he thought who he thought Dumbledore was not at all who Dumbledore was, which obviously is confirmed much later in the Snape montage, which we'll get to for sure. In Cheryl Hines too, he's great in this. Mm-hmm. It's just very persnickety, very, just like, you don't know what you're talking about, boy. And it's just great. Like it's a once again, like I'm going to keep saying this because this is the best series to say this. Just a wonderful character actor coming in, doing a couple minutes, then goes. It's just
I always forget he's in this too until he shows up. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's right. And he has like
one of those faces.
And going back to Lord of the Rings, which that was one of my biggest reactions coming out of this, seeing this in theaters the first time, is that it felt like epic on the scale of Lord of the Rings, like the in a way that none of this franchise really, none of this franchise really hit for me. Like it's fun and it's great and I love Azkaban and all that stuff, but it doesn't feel like it hits that same level. This is the closest this franchise got to hitting Lord of the Rings level for me, as far as the ensemble cast and sort of the epic stakes and good and evil and all that good stuff. But even, Aberforth has his sort of like Gandalf showing up in the battle on the front lines kind of moment too.
Yeah, no, I mean, he comes sort of in just this like, all right, I'm going to come in and just settle all this. And it's like, boom, you know what I mean? Like, just like, it's such a drop the mic moment in the middle of this battle that you're like, mad props, dude. Got to respect you. Got to respect you on that.
So then we have the theme music finally kicks in. I think one of the first times when Harry enters the school and kind of reunites with his classmates, which I thought was really sweet, kind of callback to how far this character has come. And I love that it has that sort of classic chosen one narrative where Harry, it's really the community, the sense of community and the friends. It's the friends we made along the way. It's the Buffy thing. It's the Lord of the Rings thing of it. It's the people he surrounds himself with that really make the difference in whether or not his like prophecy, and I do air quotes there, whether or not it actually bears fruit or ends up sort of, I guess deflating itself.
Yeah, no, I mean, it also feels like a breath of fresh air because of the fact that like we have been away from these people for a long time, right? And it feels like we have been sort of just like, we don't know what it's like to be around human beings in this in the last two movies because they've been lost in the woods.
In the woods.
Yeah, they've been, oh, what a feeling. They're dancing in the woods on the ceiling. And it does feel like, because then the score comes back in, like Desplat goes like, brings the Williams theme back, and you're just like, okay, I'm at Hogwarts, and I shouldn't be happy at all, right? Like there's there's no reason I should be happy, right, everyone, right? And it's because there's war happening, and then it leads to them sort of all, and we get hints of this. We get hints of this in the beginning of the film too, that like Hogwarts is basically turned into like a prison, in that it's not the school that, we've all known and loved throughout the series. It's very much become a sort of captive state with Snape leading it. At this point, there's the alarm's been triggered in Hogsmeade, and so even though he's with his friends, it's very short lived because of the fact that everybody gets called in to the Great Hall. You know what I mean? So
right, and then we get one of the standout moments for me, which is when Harry confronts Snape there and says he was your friend, he trusted you, and like about how obviously Snape's murder of Dumbledore, and I love that. I love the way the movie, it really holds back on tipping its Snape hand, because there's so many opportunities where it could have done that earlier in this film, and it essentially opens on Snape. He's kind of the stealth protagonist of this series in a weird way. Like this movie puts it in that kind of context. Mm-hmm. So I love trying to view this film specifically from Snape's perspective and how he's the sort of double speak of his actions, that he's kind of the double agent essentially, and has this duel with McGonagall. What are your thoughts on, I guess up to this point, Snape's story? And then obviously we'll get to the montage in a little bit.
I mean, when you're reading it in the book and you're reading most of the series, I think we can all pretty much agree at this point, like Snape can go straight to hell. Mm-hmm. Like the guy can just go kick rocks. And at this point in the book, but then and especially in the film, like, he's doing the Dark Lord's bid, and then like Harry pops in, and he's just like, like you said, it's telling everyone, like, tell him how you betrayed him, tell him how you killed, this man, how you killed Dumbledore, tell him the truth, and how you he's just straight up betrayed him. And he's about to sort of try to kill Harry there himself, right? And McGonagall comes out and like, it's like, yeah, like get him. You know what I mean? Like, like I don't know how you read the book, Rob, but like when she sort of like, does her motherly instincts, because that's really what she is for Harry as his mother is gone. She like Dumbledore's sort of the father figure. And I mean, he has many father figures. He has Lupin and Sirius, but it's really Dumbledore, right? That's the guy that takes him under his wing. And it's also, Dumbledore is one of the three to drop him off at the Dursleys. And that other person is McGonagall along with Hagrid. And so to see her stand up for this boy that she obviously loves. And I mean, and she just sort of like takes over. You know what I mean? It's just like, I'm not going to deal with this, shit any longer. And she knows as well. And so she gets rid of him basically because like, Snape cowers away. And there is that moment where it's a great moment too, where she just is like, Slytherin houses, because Voldemort knows that he's at Hogwarts. Right. And so he sort of kind of gets into everybody's heads and he starts, doing his little whisper dance on everybody's mind. And he's basically like, if you have Harry Potter, give me him. Like, I want him, And of course it's Slytherin house who wants to like turn him over. And then they go send those people to the dungeons where they belong throughout this entire series. And you're just like, hell yeah. You mean the bad people are supposed to be in the dungeon? You mean like, gee, the bad people that say all the terrible things, J.K. Rowling, they deserve to be in the dungeon. Reap what you sow, lady. But then there's that great moment with Maggie Smith, who's wonderful in this film too.
Yeah.
Where she just says, Potter, it's good to see you. And it feels like you're just like, yeah, it really does feel good that he's back. And even though he didn't finish school, I'm sure he's got an honorary degree. But
he saved the wizarding world and by extension,
I think he gets a pass.
So yeah, the Muggle world. So yeah.
Oh, you know what?
Close enough.
You know what? Put the school back together and take your owls, dude. Take your 7th year owls, my friend. It's very comforting, and it is a really damn good scene. It is a top 5 scene in this franchise. Like all of that. And I mean, there's so many scenes in this movie where you're just like, that's the best thing I've ever seen. That's the best thing I've ever seen in this franchise. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And it's partly, like I said, because the book is so strong. It's such a strong ending. But the movie just elevates it because of everybody that's on screen. It's like you've been with these people for a decade and then some, on screen. And so you're highly invested in the conclusion of all of this. And then, of course, it leads to when all, the Slytherin goes and everything, it leads to the battle.
Which is the whole second half of the movie, essentially, too. But yeah, no, I love the McGonagall moment. I love the fact that this series sort of, one of its like hallmarks is often the fact that these kids can't trust authority figures. So they're all like kind of sneaking around behind the teachers' backs and all that. And that the big like reaffirmation is the adults kind of taking control of the school. I love that the franchise can be viewed as sort of obviously it's an allegory for, or it's a metaphor for adolescence and, growing up and all that stuff. And in the last couple movies, it's really about realizing how complex the adult figures in your life are, that they don't have it all figured out. And sometimes they're up to some shady shit under the table. And I think you get a lot of that here where with both Snape and Dumbledore, where his Harry's perception of who they are, who he thought they were, completely changes. And yet McGonagall is like the steady hand in his life. Clearly the best teacher of all time in this movie. And I love that Maggie Smith has so many moments where she really takes charge. That's one. And then later on where she sends the sentries out and she's like, protect our school. And she's, you have that like fun little moment with her. And I think it's Molly or someone where she's like, she's always wanted to use that spell. So she finally gets to kind of take control. So I love her little it's not that much screen time, but it makes such a huge difference in the grand scheme of things.
It really does. I mean, like one, Maggie Smith is one of like the best British actresses of all time,
for sure.
But two, it's that she is sort of, while Dumbledore is known as the head of Hogwarts, she is very much like the person that keeps it all afloat. And I mean, it's clear in this movie just how integral it is to have somebody like Maggie Smith be this character, and then you finally get to see McGonagall take charge, right? And she's so confident in this leadership role. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of what I always wanted, because I was always like, man, McGonagall's such a badass. Like, why can't we see her, why can't we see her be this rather than like, I mean, she's rarely in the films, like, too. Like, it's and it might just be like a Maggie Smith thing, but it doesn't feel like we get enough of her like we do in the books or whatnot, or even at times in the books. Like, I'm like, hey, where's my pal McGonagall? You know what I mean? And because McGonagall is one of my favorite characters. Like, I just love her, period. Like, she's the glue that keeps everything together, but she's also the moral sort of compass of Hogwarts. And yeah, she's also the entry point, right? For just about all of us, because she's the one that's, you know, there to be there for Harry, you know, right at the beginning of the first novel. And so she's the motherly figure to all, but she's also very fiery. And I just love that she's just like she's get these stone statues out there and she's taking charge and everything. She's like, but then she's also like, I've always wanted to do that spell. You know what I mean? Like, she's also like very giddy as well. Like, this is another wonderful thing about the movie where it continues to balance the tone perfectly to the point where it doesn't feel like, you know, like sometimes when you watch a Marvel movie, those movies can feel very, you know, like, oh God, this is too jokey. And this movie knows, yes, it's a war movie, but it's also a Harry Potter movie. And so there's no sense in losing the sort of the fun nature within this darkness, if that makes sense.
Right. No, totally. And it keeps it rooted in character. And I think that's what makes the big difference there, and keeps us engaged even when, you know, obviously there's a lot of like visual effects and stuff happening in the Battle of Hogwarts, but you know, we've spent, like you said, we spent 10 years with these characters. It keeps us focused on the people that we love and the characters that we've grown with. And so you never really lose sight of what's at stake, so that you can get, you know, this last movie where Neville is, you know, kind of has this whole heroic story where he's the one that kills Nagini. He has that whole like Death Eaters moment at the spell. It's very like a very Star Wars Han Solo running away from the stormtroopers kind of deal. So he's got his whole little arc. Ron spontaneously, you know, knows how to speak parcel tongue and actually kind of proves his value to the team. I feel like for the first time in a while, because in a lot of these movies, you know, Hermione's kind of taking the lead with the, you know, coming up with the strategy and all that stuff. And Harry's obviously has the courage, and Ron's just kind of there for a lot of it. But I feel like he has contributed throughout the series. And I think that's the movie China throwing it out there, but like, yeah, and Ron, he's important too. See, he does stuff. And so I love that he and Hermione are the ones that destroy the cup in the Chamber of Secrets, again, bringing it back full circle to those Chris Columbus movies.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great to see sort of everyone get to do their own thing. I mean, even like Mrs. Weasley, like innocent Mrs. Weasley, right? That just wants to cook for everybody. And that it's the perfect thing in the book. It's the most shocking thing in the book, and it's also like one of the most satisfying things. And it's a thing where, you know, get away from my daughter, you bitch. You know what I mean? And it's, you know, it's obviously very Aliens inspired, right? But it or at least it feels like it. And if it's not, then I mean, it feels like a ripoff then at that point. what I love about it is that we do get to see sort of everybody in action. It feels like the book, which is crazy because like in the book, all these progressions and all these relationships and all these things are there, and they're not in the other movies. Like, I think the one giant mistake they did in this whole series, and everyone can agree with in the movies, is that in the books, Harry ends up with Ginny, and Ron ends up with Hermione, right?
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, in these movies, Radcliffe has insane chemistry with Watson,
right?
And Watson has and Grint have like their chemistry is fine, but it's not the one where you would think of like, oh, those two seem like they're at each other's throats because they're in love. They feel like friends that are annoyed as hell with one another, if that makes sense.
At best, it sounds like the beginning of a kind of toxic relationship.
Yeah, it feels like this isn't going to end well for anyone. So why don't we just all do a favor here and not let this happen? But right. that was the thing. Is like, that was the thing about the books in the movies, is that the movies had started, right? But the books were ahead of them. So I remember just being like, they can change this at any point. Like, and I remember everyone was always like, oh, it feels like Hermione's going to end up with Ron, because opposites attract. And I was just like, I don't know if you guys are watching these movies or not. But because especially like, Prisoner of Azkaban, right? There's the whole segment where, it's Radcliffe and Watson together, right? For the majority of the film. And you're just kind of like, I don't know about y'all, but these two, chemistry, they're sparks. Like,
well, Ron's terrified of that happening. Look at the whole like vision thing that he gets from the Horcrux in the seventh movie.
And he really should, because of the fact that it's the right thing, but yeah, like, the relationship with Jenny is just terrible. Like it's not set up at all in these movies. And it's the one part that does drive me nuts, is that this movie, these books are about teenagers, and teenagers are, they got their bodies are changing. It's growing. Things are different, Rob, around that time.
Oh boy, nobody warned me about this.
Well,
the first time hearing.
So, well, let me sit you down and I'll tell you about the birds and the bees, my friend. But no, it doesn't feel these movies were interested in any of the nuances of relationships and building off of that, other than it just being very superficial. And that really upsets me, because the books do, and I will say this about Rowling, she does a great job of establishing these relationships where you buy it in the books and you don't buy it here. So like when she's like, Ginny's giving giving Harry a kiss goodbye and say, return or come back or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't buy any of it. You know what I mean? That's the one thing I don't buy. And I'm like, oh, come on. Like, because I don't buy that in these films, the progression has got to that point.
Right.
But other than that, I mean, every other character beat in these films are perfectly done, because they're either payoffs from the book or payoffs from the films themselves. Right. And, but yet I still think that, this movie isn't this movie like the shortest Harry Potter film? Right? Or
I think it is. Yeah. I think it's like 2 hours and I don't know, like 10 minutes or something. And that's with credits. So really like 2 hours.
Yeah. It's really quick. Like it's sprinting to the finish line. It's, and it's way ahead of the pack, but it's sprinting still, it could have just walked and it didn't have to. I still would have loved like more time with some characters like Tonks and Lupin. More time with the Weasley brothers than just sort of like the Flash that we get, or with the rest of Dumbledore's army or whatever. You know what I mean? There's stuff in the books that there's more there, and I think that it could have been fleshed out. That said, everyone gets a moment. At least they get a moment, right? Or they get a shot or something here. But the film isn't really focused on the moments. It's really just focused on the fact that like, We get this giant battle. We get these enormous set pieces. We get some of the best visual effects you're ever going to see, in especially in this series. And you're just like, even though most people in the audience know how this movie ends, except my parents who never read the books. So when they saw these movies, they were just like, how's it going to end? And I'm like, oh, well, if you would have just read the books. And so it was like sort of a contradiction that you made me read these books, but yet y'all didn't. Then you know how this is all going to end. And yet you're kind of on the edge of your seat the entire time. Right, Rob?
Yeah, for sure. I think I love how much of this feels like, in a way, sort of Harry Potter's greatest hits. We get the chamber sequence, we get the room of requirement. We even get a brief moment where the Cornish pixies pop up, I think, in the room of requirement. There's a couple of them living in there. There's trolls, there's spiders. There's a lot of like all the iconography from the franchise kind of comes back here. And yet none of it really feels ham-handed. It all feels like kind of a natural progression. And the movie doesn't waste a lot of time being like, hey, remember this? And I think that's to its credit. Also, since you mentioned Lupin and Tonks, I love the sort of parallel there, the kind of that violence begets violence, sort of cyclical nature of it, that now Lupin and Tonks have a child who is an orphan like Harry was when the franchise started. I think that's kind of an interesting parallel. But I feel like we're getting really close to the Snape moment, the death scene, the montage. That always makes me cry, even though I've seen this movie several times. So we get the revelation that the Elder Wand belongs to the wizard who killed its last owner, apparently. And that was the wand business I was alluding to earlier. So Voldemort basically, slits Snape's throat with a spell, basically. And then Nagini kind of finishes the job. It's like, you could have just grabbed a knife, dude. Now you're just like showing off.
Or you could have just like evaporated him or something. Like, you didn't have to to let him bleed out.
You wanted him to suffer a little bit. So he could have just Avada Kedavra this dude and be done with it. But then Harry wouldn't be able to take his tears. So I appreciate that it does that. So then, to the point that you were saying earlier with Maggie Smith, the sort of shorthand that you get, Snape is hugely pivotal to this movie. But up to this point, we've seen him sort of, leading Hogwarts in a couple scenes, getting chased off. And then now his whole story sort of envelops in this span of, 5 minutes or 3 minutes or however long his montage is. But that moment with Harry where he sees Harry and his eyes, obviously, he has his mother's eyes, as he's told repeatedly over and over again. Oh, God. And I'm just like sobbing the whole time that this is happening. He's like, my tears take them. And he wants Harry to know the truth of his actions, that, what his connection was. Yeah.
Take them. And you're just like, oh, God. And it's just, obviously, Rob, you've talked about him, Alan Rickman, just the defining performance of this entire franchise is in this entire sequence. So I know we're talking about it, but it's so damn good. It's so good. I miss him because he was such a presence on screen, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's because of Rickman that this whole Snape's death scene, the montage, is probably my favorite sequence of the entire saga. Just because it compresses so much story and so much character development in such a short time. And that's a testament to his ability as an actor to be able to sell that and have you feel Snape's emotion in that last moment of his life. And then sort of just getting snippets of his perspective of everything that's going, the Patronus that he sends to help Harry in Azkaban, which is the same Patronus as his mother. So it sort of implies to me, and I mentioned this on the previous episode, but it sort of implies to me that those two were meant to be together in some way, and then kind of fate had something different in mind. Thoughts on this montage, because it reveals so much. It's like I kind of trying to figure out how to unpack it.
It is the definition of you can't judge a book by its cover. Harry, throughout this entire series, has tried to blame Severus Snape, make him a villain, basically try to get him locked up, in Azkaban. Because literally in the first film, he's like, "Oh, it's Snape. Snape's the bad guy," And you're just
look at his pale face and his greasy hair.
Yeah, look at Alan Rickman.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like that man looks like he hasn't showered in days, and he's got to be suspicious, right? And I think, and then also too the sort of progression of him throughout the rest of the series. I mean, this is a man that caused physical harm to get more answers from Sirius Black. This is a man that's, tried to, in like Order of the Phoenix, if I'm not mistaken, try to use like therapy on him, to try to, tell him to control his mind, which what he uses and is successfully using throughout the rest of the series. Basically it just proves that Harry's an ungrateful little shit. But the number one thing, also
one of his kids, his name.
I know, but
Albus Severus.
It's a terrible name. But it's really like you name one and name the other. Don't put it all in one child. Like you knew you were going to have more than one, right? You're the chosen one, not the chosen just only child. Like you were an only child. Do you really think you're going to have a small family? And like you saw how the Weasleys are. They morph like 100 at a time. Like anyway, that's beside the point. Is that also too, like this is a guy that like literally hours before he's yelling and screaming at and pissed and wants to kill. You know what I mean? There's no question in my mind that he definitely wants to kill Snape, for what he does to Dumbledore. And so then you see him through this montage really understand, because there's been also the confrontations about like, in Order of the Phoenix, about the relationship that Snape has with his father, right? And how his father sort of picked on Snape and everything, but yet we didn't know to the extent of how connected, his mother Lily was to Severus. And not only do we see all the pain and the sacrifices he has to make with that, but then we see the sacrifices and sort of the almost devotion he has to give from, being turned from Voldemort to then doing the same thing for Dumbledore. It almost feels like he's trapped either way. And it's devastating because it's like he's serving one, lord to the other. Right. And he's always going to be a footman. You see the pain and everything of how he's having to sort of negate both sides. And you then realize that this man sacrificed a ton, you know what I mean? To basically have this boy survive to get to the point where he's at. And he only did what he did because he was told to do it. It's a devastating montage. It's beautifully acted. And then it also shows who found Harry, the night of his parents' murder, right?
Yep.
It's Severus. And I will never get the image of Alan Rickman crying his, eyes out of my head. And that child looking at just a man who has lost the love of his life, and then Dumbledore's sort of shock reaction that it was Lily, right? And then he's like, it was always her, and always will be her,
right?
So yeah, it's it's peak this series, man. It's really
for
good.
sure. Well, and then in that one scene, that single word "always" has become like just iconic because of how much it reveals. Just like in an instant, you see not only how he's been sort of torn apart for years between having to try and feign loyalty to Voldemort but really kind of serving Dumbledore, and how he had, like you said, swapped sides, but then that he's had to help protect this boy who on one hand he loathes because it's James Potter's son, but on the other hand he can't help but keep an eye out for, and sort of have feelings to in protecting for, because it's Lily's son too. So it's like you understand why on the one hand he'll like call Harry out in class and how he's being like, arrogant and stuff, just like his father. And then 2 seconds later, like Lupin as a werewolf will try and attack the kids, and he like literally jumps in front of them. It just all of a sudden, everything that he's done over the past 7 movies makes complete sense. And it's a really powerful bit of acting and storytelling and editing, and the Desplat score as well. It's an impeccable portion of the movie. For sure.
It's so good. It's so good. And then in like Harry coming out of it, it's like you see his face, and then he like, it's almost like oh my God, like what the hell did I do? Like, why? It's almost like another tragedy upon this young man. Yeah, it really is. It's almost, it is basically, he realized, oh my God, like I've lost another parent. I lost another guardian. It's then at that point, then he starts realizing what he really has to do. You know what I mean? Right.
Well, and he learns in that sequence that Dumbledore has been keeping him alive so that as Snape says he could die at the proper moment. That Snape has really almost kind of had his back more than Dumbledore, and Dumbledore's like, no, we need to keep him alive, so that when we get to this point, then he can die. It's like he's playing the long game. That Dumbledore wasn't the perfect father figure or mentor that he thought he was. And meanwhile, he's been laying all this crap at Snape's feet, but it's Snape that hasn't really actually has only done things to protect him for the most part. So it's pretty astounding. We learn that Harry is the last Horcrux, obviously there. And I love how, after that revelation comes along that he has to die at Voldemort's hand, that Harry seems ready to die. Like he makes peace with it, before he even finds the resurrection stone and all of that. So we're coming out of this montage of Snape and his actions throughout the course of the franchise. Then our hero, our young hero, is like ready to sacrifice himself to sort of bring their plan to fruition. And then we get the conference, what I call it, a conference of ghosts, waiting for Harry, sort of on the other side. And I really love this scene as well. This is another scene. I'm still crying at this point watching the movie. It's like pretty much from Snape's, because you get Snape's death. Then you get the sort of Lupin and Tonks dead, everybody dead in Fred Weasley, I think. Then you get the montage. Then you get all the ghosts, and he's like, you're still here. And he's like, then they're like, we never left. And he's like, does it hurt? All that. He's like, are you gonna will you stay with me? And they're like, until the end. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting emotional talking about it. It's so good. Yeah, it just heightens everything he's lost up to this point.
I mean, it is the devastating realization of like, yeah, guys, I'm actually what we've been chasing this whole time. Because we forgot to mention, I mean, there's like a big sort of chase in the room of requirement for one. There's the like you mentioned, there's the
whole thing with the diadem,
the diadem, and Helena Ravenwood and sort of, and then also like you said earlier, the Chamber of Secrets and all that. So I mean, there's all sort of starting to lead up to that, and then there's that realization that he is the last one, and it then once he's accepted it, and of course Ron and Hermione are just devastated. Then he has the scene with his parents and Sirius, and who's the fourth?
Lupin.
Is it Lupin?
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good, right?
And I think Harry says, "Stay close to me," and then his mom says, "Always," and you're like, "Oh my God,
oh God, not again, not that word, the safe word,
sort of,
or the unsafe word, because then I'm gonna shed tears." Exactly. And then he goes, and then this right here at this point is when the movie turns into the Ralph Fiennes badass actor of all time memoriam, because the rest of this movie that he's in. I mean, he's good so far, and he's always been good. I mean, like his scene in Goblet of Fire in the graveyard is one of like the most all-time badass character introductions ever. Just and how he is so perfectly cast, right? Like how he is just, it's like, yes, of course you got one of the greatest actors of all time to play this villain. Like this makes total sense. Like, yeah. And I'll say that Ralph Fiennes, I'll put him up against just about anybody working today. Like when he is on there, and that's usually every time he's on screen, nobody can touch him. Like there's no one can touch him. And when he sees Harry emerge, I mean, it's so sinister, right? And it's almost just like, this is too good to be true, but it's happening and I'm going to end it. And then, he Avada Kedavras him. And then we see like this giant bolt of just, blankness. And then we end up in the railway station. I don't know if Scrimbleshanks was there, but we're in the cat of the railway train or anything. but we're at the railway station.
Skimble, where is Skimble?
Where is Skimble? I can hear him tip tapping somewhere.
Oh boy!
But then that's when, of course, Harry and Dumbledore have their moment in this film too.
Yeah. Back it up a little. I like also to your point about the three characters that introduced us to this whole story. That we do finally get Hagrid in this movie, and he's like tied down in the forest.
Oh, that's
and he's like, he's witness to it too. That's the thing. He brought Harry to.
That's the third. That's the third. That's the sort of. It's the. I mean, in a weird way, it's the third. It's like it's the triangle. It's like the Deathly Hallows, or whatever.
Yeah,
it's the third person that is so. It's the last guardian, right? Because then, like when this happens later, and like Harry's body is laying,
it's Hagrid carrying it. I believe
it's Hagrid carrying him, just like he did. Oh my Jesus! It's like, oh my God, no, I'm not gonna cry. It's like him carrying him as a child when his parents had died. Only it's him chained up carrying him with his dead body. It's
really powerful for a series that started off so like whimsical and full of wonder. You're like, wow, this has got bleak and dark as shit.
It's
the boy who lived come to die. It's like, wow, goddamn.
And that was all in the marketing too. And you're just like, oh shit, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. So then we get the Elder Wand stuff going down about who's the real owner of it and all that stuff. We get the little baby bloody Voldemort, like the little newborn Voldemort sort of living in Harry's mind. Kind of the same little Voldemort baby that's thrown in the cauldron in Goblet of Fire. It looks like pretty much. Yeah. It is like the little fragment of his soul that's living inside Harry that he made the accidental Horcrux. And then I love the irony now, knowing about what we know about the unnamed author of this text. That there's a thing that he says, Dumbledore says about how words are an inexhaustible source of magic. He says, "Help will always be given to those who deserve it." And then he says, "Do not pity the dead, pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." And I'm like, interesting. So hate is not a good thing, is what you're saying, right? Not to hate other people or judge their life decisions. Way to bring it home.
I mean, she really is screwed up, is what we're saying, folks. Like she is
pretty much.
She's off the deep end. Watch as she dives in. She is
nice,
far from the shallow now. Like, good Lord, lady. Like, which is a WB property, by the way. No, it's God, I hate her so much. But going back to this scene with Dumbledore, I mean, it's Harry coming sort of with like his version of Dumbledore in his head, right? And having the last conversation he's going to have. And you don't really get any answers there, right?
I know, it's very telling that Dumbledore in his head is kind of a total dick and walks off, giving Harry some riddles. He's like, I don't know, am I? Whoa. And then the scampers off screen, like, geez,
am I
dude.
real? It's like, is any of this real
at all?
Is this the real life or is this just fantasy? You know what I mean? It's like, dude, just answer his question. Like, not everything's a riddle. You're not the Riddler. You're Dumbledore. And so again, wrong DC property.
Yeah, another WB property. Yeah,
WB property. Yes, but I mean, it's just, but it's so frustrating. But it's also very purposeful because it's Harry sort of coming to the realization of what he was in this whole thing too. He was a pawn in this as well. Mm-hmm. Like, he has to learn that, and it's the last lesson. It's this, like, yeah, you were the last pawn. No one was going to tell you were the Horcrux. Otherwise, you probably would have killed yourself already by now, or something would have happened. And now that you know, it's like, okay, now what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And then, of course, it also brings up the sort of religious undertaking of what this really means. Like, he's the boy wonder, he's the chosen one. He's coming back to life, to sort of, end evil, the devil. And, there's a giant Jesus allegory with this too. But ultimately, and I mean also too, being like carried like by Hagrid, almost like he's being carried like on a cross, because Hagrid's all chained up and everything. But and he goes to some version of heaven, I guess, or just, in his own mind, because everything's very white and lily, and then you see like just Dumbledore walk off into the distance. It is very reflective, and it does also feel just like, it feels like it's the place where Harry can find the peace that he needs, because when he comes back, he's so supremely confident, right? And then when it's all over, he's very confident, right? Because he's like, yep, it's done. You know what I mean? I did it. It's not bragging about it or anything. He's just like, yeah, it's done. And now I have to go live my life. You know what I mean? Like, I cannot, there's always like the jokes about, like, I've seen online where it's like, yeah, Harry Potter is probably like the guy in the bar like 40 years later, like, remember when I killed Voldemort? Can I get another?
I saved us all.
Can I get another beer, please?
Yeah,
like, that's what it feels like. It always feels like that could have been, but he doesn't feel like that here. He feels very much like a guy that appreciates that he's gotten a second chance to now actually really live a life,
right? Rather
than his whole life, which is this monocle of celebrity wrapped in with this folklore of and also grave danger. So it's almost like, is he the myth or a legend at this point?
Right.
No, I think he's just a human being.
Right.
So,
yeah, exactly.
So that's what he gets at the end of this conversation. It's just like, I can go be a human after I go, kill this son of a bitch. You know what I mean? Like, so.
Yeah. Let's finish this off. Let's come on, Tom. Let's finish this the way we started it together, basically. Yeah. Which is great, and which was all in the trailers and stuff. And go ahead.
It's that is a little awkward. Like the delivery of that. Like, come on, Tom, let's finish this together. What is this, like, Merchant Ivory? Like, come on, like, it's. But
I love that he calls him Tom. He kind of, underscores
to get under his skin.
All the myth, which is exactly what Dumbledore did. And I think, what is it? Order of the Phoenix.
Order of the Phoenix. Yeah.
Yeah. He does the same thing. He's like, you shouldn't have come tonight, Tom. He's like, motherfucker.
Yeah. He's like, oh, by the way.
Represent.
Yeah. By the way, like, the Order of the Phoenix has sort of like that. The other day on Twitter, people were talking about like Attack of the Clones. Mm-hmm. And like Attack of the Clones is a bad movie, but like the last 20 minutes of Attack of the Clones is like the best thing about it, right? Mm-hmm. The last 20 minutes of Order of the Phoenix is the best thing because you have Dumbledore versus Voldemort, which in the book, it is way longer than what it is in the film. And that's how long it should have been. Like, I should have seen like a 30-minute battle between the two greatest forces in the wizarding world, right? And you sort of kind of get this here, right, with Harry and him, but that's what I always wanted. I was like, can I have like the extended cut of just that fight sequence alone, please? But and so then, obviously, we flash back to sort of, the real world, right? And they bring Harry's body, and then everybody comes out, and then
Ray you have that. Yeah, I was gonna say you have that great like Harry Potter is dead,
and now it's your time to join. You know what I mean? And then I'd love it when Neville interrupts him, because like he just like Voldemort puts his hand out like, I don't want to kill him, and then he's like, oh, okay, Neville. Yes, Neville. We'd all be fascinated to hear what you have to say. And it's like, I want to kill him. But I'm trying to be peaceful. I'm trying to be nice. You know what I mean? And
giving them a choice first, then I'll kill whoever resists.
Yes. And I laugh at it every time, because I always laugh at certain sinister, uncomfortabilities. And I think Fiennes is wonderful in this scene. Like, that is like if you wanted to, I know we could have, like, everyone was all like, push Rickman for supporting actor. I was always like, you could push Ray Fiennes for supporting actor too, because he's got that scene. Like, it is it's a big scene, and he's like the sole focus of it, right? Yeah. And I love that. And then sort of Neville getting the sword out, right? Because they realize they have to kill the snake, right? And or they don't know that. I think at that point, I don't believe, or maybe they do know that at the point. Do you remember? Do they know at that point?
The order of which?
I think they know that. I think he says it's like the snake, and then it's me, right? Before he goes off, if I'm not mistaken. That's what Harry says.
Yeah, I think so.
And then we see sort of Harry come out of Hagrid's arms, like, resurrect.
What a satisfying moment that is, by the way.
There's so many things that happen within that 30 seconds on screen that is like amazing, because it's everyone's joyful, like, befuddlement on the good guy side. Like, Voldemort, like, what the hell? And he's like looking at his wand, like, does this thing work? Like, and then the Malfoy's just like splitting out of there, because like,
I know
the Malfoy stuff before were like Voldemort asks Draco to come to him, right? And they're like, come to our side, Draco. Is bone chilling, right? Like, and then like the sort of hug that he has to give him, he's like, good boy. It's that's also very just like, oh my God, like, he wants to snap his neck so bad. So they're like hightailing out there, but so are so many other people, right? Because they're like, oh my God, like, we can't kill this kid. There's no way. Like, get the hell out of here, guys. You know what I mean? And it's quite hysterical to watch all that, because I was watching it again today, and I was just like, oh, those people. It's like kind of like when everybody's like they're on their team or they're on their side, and then you realize that like everything that they've ever said about any of that person turns out to be wrong, and they're just like running away from all those takes or all those things that they've ever said, you know what I mean? Or they run away from their candidate after they lose an election or whatever that may be,
I can't imagine that.
Can't imagine that happening, and then of course the ones that stick around are the ones that can handle the defeat, and we'll never be able to do that. Wonderful, political allegories.
For sure.
Nothing problematic in that as well. But no, it then does lead to Voldemort just being extremely pissed, and like him going into the castle for the first time since he was, Tom, and just like laying waste to the interior decorating.
Bastard.
Doesn't he know?
The unforgivable, right?
Yeah, but it's it goes back to like, no, they had all the wands. They could just, they don't have to build it. Like, they can just be like, and it gets fixed. Just like Harry, if Harry's glasses can get fixed with a wand, I'm pretty sure somebody can do it with like, I mean, don't they show it in like Fantastic Beasts? And where to find it? Like the whole city of New York gets like destroyed. In the first film,
I think so. I blacked out. I blacked out that movie.
Yeah. So therefore, like they did a spell and everything's rebuilt. So, and that's set in the past. So this is in the present, right? So there's a spell to fix all this. So basically, like doing it at Hogwarts is sort of like collateral damage. Like, I mean, like there's nothing you could burn the whole place to the ground, and then like, one spell and you're back in business and everybody's enrolling in the fall,
It's very possible. I think it doesn't McGonagall does kind of fix everything after Snape like pieces out when she takes over the school, and kind of like all the flags come back down or whatever. But I wanted to mention, I love that moment when Narcissa goes over and over Harry's body, and it's like, Draco, is he alive? And then, like you said, once they get Draco, they're like, we're getting the fuck out of Dodge. I think
Draco, but Draco knows he's not dead. But he doesn't. But he lies. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I like that the Malfoys are like, yeah, we're magic Nazis and all that, and we're down with it. But it reaches a certain point where even we're like, self-preservation.
It's like they drew their line in the sands. You know what I mean?
To choose my words very carefully, self-preservation trumps whatever this guy's got going on. With Harry Potter.
It's like Trumps. No, very good choice of words.
Thank you. So then they have the epic fight, and Voldemort goes all ashy and just explodes at a certain point,
which I didn't like.
Yeah, it's weird. It always feels weird the way that happens. They fight, and then all of a sudden he just evaporates. It's like it happens.
He didn't even get like a bolt of anything into him.
No,
it's just he basically like dewands him, right?
Yeah,
and then he's just like, you know what I mean? Like, because they kill the snake, because Neville kills the snake. Yeah. Let's talk about the real hero of this whole thing, which is Neville killing the snake.
Yep.
Get him the credit. Maybe he's, actually, never mind. Harry's not going to be the guy drunk at the bar. It's going to be Neville. And he's going to be like, I killed the snake. Give me another butter beer. You know what I mean? And so that's what's going to happen. Yeah, for sure.
Who ends up with Luna Lovegood? We need to throw that out there.
Which also is kind of hinted at the end, but like, once again, not really giving us, the blueprint there, guys.
Nope, not really. I love Luna Lovegood, though. She's a great character.
She's
super cool.
She's, wonderful. And the actress who played her was like perfect casting. Like just once again, perfect casting. But no, it's I don't understand it because like in the book, there's like an actual body, right? Like the body's still. Like, if I'm not mistaken, like there's still a body and then like get rid of it. Because then that's when Cursed Child comes into play. Then there's still the sort of like, there's still the vague hint of like, what if somebody like tried to revive this body and bring it back Mummy Return style? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, which is not a Warner Brothers property. I didn't understand that. It almost felt like it also didn't explain that, like, just because you kill the Horcruxes doesn't mean he's dead. You know what I mean?
It means he's vulnerable.
It means he's extremely vulnerable. And that's where it's like, it didn't, like, he's got to just like kill him. You know what I mean? Like at that point, like, and I guess I just need to see a bolt of Harry's wand go into his, heart, and that's it. Right. Well, there's no heart there, obviously, but you know what I mean, in his body, and then that's it. Because, like, I mean, they were able to do it with Helena Bonham Carter,
Bellatrix,
Bellatrix. So, and like, dude, that was the same thing, right? She stunned her, and then she like went full, and then that's how she. Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So I always was sitting in the theater going, wait, did I miss something? Was there something cut? Like, did I look up at my watch or something? Like, I think that they totally missed that sort of ball there, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe the fact that he's unnaturally prolonged his life for so long and now is vulnerable. He exerts himself too much and it's just like, oh crap. I pushed it. I pushed my immortality past its bounds, and then just does like a slow motion Thanos, just ashes, dusts himself. Spoilers for that movie by the end, but yeah, I do like the fact that Harry doesn't die, apparently, according to the mythos, because he's essentially the master of death, because he has all 3 Deathly Hallows in his possession. And to your earlier point, he doesn't really want that power. He doesn't really want to be invincible. So he just like snaps the Elder Wand in half and chucks it into the ocean. And I love the way that he just rejects that. He's like, yeah, no, I don't want to do this whole good and evil stuff anymore. Let me just be an Auror and work at the Ministry. Once we drain the swamp and and just live a normal life with Ginny and have a bunch of kids with convoluted names, I guess.
Yeah, but then it ends with him revealing that the wand was never Draco's or never Snape's or whatever. It was always Harry's, right?
Right.
And so I love Ron and Hermione's reaction when he breaks it, right? And just kind of like chucks it. And they're like, did he just okay, yeah, I guess he's the chosen one. He can do whatever the hell he wants. And then, it ends with the epilogue.
Yeah, thoughts on the epilogue? I know it's kind of divisive among some fans.
Yeah, people hate this epilogue. It's sweet. Like, can I have the sweetness of this damn series back for like 5 minutes? You know, I've just watched a bleak 2-hour and 5-minute movie. Like, I'd like to have 5 minutes of like the fact that, the repercussions of them saving the world means that their family and families after and generations of people and their kids can go on to the same place that they had wonderful experiences and changed their lives. It's a beautiful sentiment.
Yeah.
And then also,
I think so,
there is the whole thing with, his kids being named after, you were named after 2 of the most important people. Okay. Yeah, I get that. But it is also in the film with Radcliffe and this crew, which I'm glad they didn't do like older actors. I'm glad that it was just like our actors with a little bit of makeup put onto them, which was fun.
Yeah. Ron has a little bit of like a beer belly or whatever, I think, going on. I'm like, he looks like he's in his late 30s. That sounds about right.
A butterbeer belly, but yes.
Yeah, exactly. Butterbeer is awesome, by the way. At least in Islands of Adventure over here in Florida. Good stuff.
Yeah, because you went last week, right?
Yeah, I'm there right now.
You're there right now. Where do you think I've been doing this the whole time?
Yeah, live from Hogwarts, ladies.
Live from the room of Requiry. It's the Cricket Table.
It's just this podcast studio just popped up out of nowhere.
Oh my God. This is exactly what I wanted out of this room. The mic was here and everything. And what's weird is it knew my passwords. Room of requirements. If it knows my credit card, I'm getting out of this room. But anyway, no, it's a great way to end it. And it sort of ends like we said with the rest of this movie and the books and everything. It ends where we began. It ends with a young man going to a place that he's nervous about for the first time in his life and getting to start their adventures. Only this time that young man is the next generation of Potter. Right. And it's because of what all we've seen in these 8 movies, 7 books, that a third generation of Potter can go to Hogwarts, and that's kind of great. And so I think it's a great ending. Sometimes it's just nice to end on a good note. It's sort of a sweet note, and also, look, she is a terrible person, but she is a good writer, and she knows that, like, deep down, she always wrote these books for her child. Right. And that these are children's books. So if I'm going to give you basically all an adult film, like a war film this entire time, I also have to show you that this movie is still in this book at its heart. The story is about children. Yeah, I think it's great. I don't know what you think about it, Rob.
No, I agree. I always liked the epilogue. I don't really 100% buy into the whatever backlash there is, because I don't know, the characters don't necessarily look like they're in their 30s to some people or whatever. It's like, who cares? I think, like you said, I love that it brings it back around to where we started. It ends on a note of hope. And, the whole point of it is that life goes on and there'll be dark times, but, it's worth fighting for and persisting through it to, to build a better, it's cheesy, but to build a better world for your children kind of thing. And I love that element of it as well. Just that it implies there are other adventures, hopefully not as dark and depressing as the one you just witnessed, but there are other adventures to come and that the wizarding world goes on. And, maybe no one really wanted that in the form of the Fantastic Beasts movies or the Cursed Child. But I think that it ends the series on a nice ellipsis, kind of implying that there are other things to come. So, is there anything somehow about Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 we haven't talked about, Ryan, that you wanted to make sure we get to before we start wrapping up?
Oh my God. I
think we did pretty thorough. It's not even that long a movie, like we said, comparatively.
No, it's not. And yet I'm just trying to think real quick. I think we've covered it all.
Would you want anything else from this franchise? Like obviously Fantastic Beasts are kind of whatever, but would you want them to do, now that it's been 10 years, like in a few years, do Albus Severus is in Hogwarts? What? Or you'd kind of like, yeah, let's just leave it alone.
I would like them to do the Cursed Child with the cast.
You would?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of fans also don't like that either now.
No, but
I was sort of what I referenced.
But here's what I'll do. I'm not having her write the screenplay.
Well, she shouldn't be. She's not a good screenwriter. She shouldn't be writing screenplays.
I think if that's the case, because I know Warner Brothers is going to want to get into this franchise as much as possible, and it does. It's like I've always said. Like I don't think it was actually the end of the Skywalker saga last year, because I think they'll come back in 10 years with Rey or something, and a boatload of cash. Because
word on the street is that Rey is technically a Skywalker by the end of that. So it's the end of the Skywalker saga, but we'll end it with another. Did it really? Being like, but I'm still a Skywalker.
Did it really end? We're all Skywalker, even Broom Kid. R.I.P. Broom Kid in that series.
R.I.P. I mean, we don't know what happened to Broom Kid.
I'm pretty dark. Sure. All I can tell you is J.J. Abrams didn't want to use them. That's for sure.
No, yeah, that's for sure.
So, but no, I think I would like to see. Yeah, I think I would be okay with a continuation. Maybe it's not Cursed Child. Maybe they just sort of ditch that and sort of throw it out. But if I did see it, I would want it from the perspective of the children. Yes, I think that's at least where Rowling went correct with the book or the screenplay, or whatever the hell you want to call the thing, is that she focused it on those children, which is the right thing to do. I think she completely shat the bed with Draco. The entire and sort of and how interesting of a character he could be when he's older, right? And so I think that's where you bring somebody in, you tweak it up a little bit. At this point, it's basically Warner Brothers property, and they do whatever the hell they want with it. And I mean, I think at a certain point, I'm telling you, if they ever did it and brought back the original cast, or at least most of the original cast, like it would destroy at the box office. Like, forget about it. Like, they would make $2 to $3 billion. Like, it would be insane. Like, the amount of money it would make, because of the fact that, like, this is what franchises should do: is take a deep breath, take a step back, not make everything all at once. That's why I think Star Wars, had a little bit of a problem with its new season or new series, was because they were making one every year. And even with the prequels, like, those were every 3 years, because Lucas was still making them and they had the full story. And I'm not a fan of those movies, but at least it was planned out and thought out. And so I like it when franchises take a deep breath. They come back every 2 to 3 years or whatever. This is like 10 years at this point.
Well, unless you count the Fantastic Beasts. Again, I feel like that's the thing with a lot of these.
What movies?
Yeah, right. That's the thing with these fantasy series, is that they keep going back.
Are you going to cover the Fantastic Beasts movies?
Hell no.
Well, therefore they don't count. Like, nobody counts.
I don't think they count. But Warner Brothers is using those to keep this IP alive.
Like I said, it is every other November. Like, Warner Brothers just sits back and says, "You want to blow $100 million just in the month of November?" and see if we make our money back. Let's do an interesting experiment. Are people interested in the Harry Potter franchise without Harry Potter? I don't think so. I mean, The Crimes of Grindelwald, one of the worst movies of all time. Like it's so bad.
I still haven't even seen it. So you sat through it?
Yeah, well, I didn't pay for it. It was on HBO. Well,
right, it's on HBO Max, and honestly, after doing this series of episodes, I'm kind of been tempted to. Should I just throw it on and be like, "Wow, it's not interested"?
I'm telling you this. Like the first Fantastic Beasts, it's fine. It's not a bad movie. It was fine the first time I saw it, and then I saw it the second time. I was like, "This isn't as great as the first time I watched it," but it's still fun. Like there's fun stuff in it. The second one just is like not good. That's the best review I think I can give it, is not good.
It's also the most common review, I think.
It has the stupidest ending to a movie I've seen in a long time. And that includes Judi Dench talking to me with her wedding ring on her hand in Cats. Like,
well, you didn't know that a cat is not a dog? I mean, we all learned that was a lesson we all had to learn. So it's just like one of those mind-blowing moments. You're sitting in the theater and you're like, a cat is not a dog. Damn. Never thought of it that way.
I never computed that in my brain. So no, but yeah, I mean, don't watch them or watch them either way. I mean, if you have HBO Max, I mean,
yeah, I do.
You might as well just, I mean, it's 2 hours. You're like editing something or writing.
That feels like, I was going to say, it feels like the perfect thing to put on in the background, be writing something like
some of us put on reruns of Seinfeld and Friends. You put on the Crimes of Grindelwald. You know what I mean? And the ultimate
curiosity. HBO Max has my money already anyway, so it's not
the
like
ultimate
I'm supporting.
crime of that movie is that now Johnny Depp doesn't have a career anymore. So like that'll be the last thing we ever see of him in the mainstream capacity. So, and you know what? The punishment fits the crime. So.
Well, I think the interesting thing with this franchise is that now Warner Brothers is kind of stuck with what's She Who Must Not Be Named, wanting to make all like 5 of these things. And they're like, how do we get out of this and not piss her off too much? Because we want to keep making Harry Potter stuff, just not this crap. It's because, now I feel like they're just like waiting, like biding their time until they can figure out how to resolve this. Hopefully not with 5 movies, because that's ridiculous. But they're just kind of like stuck in a holding pattern, I think, until they can get around to exactly what you're talking about, which is picking up this timeline, this continuity with these characters and these actors.
I've heard the rumors that they would sort of reboot it and redo the entire series and like in a TV format. And if they did that, I mean, I kind of like it, but then I'm also like, these people that play these characters are now what I think of when I think of Harry Potter. And it's not even 10 years old. Like I've got the hoodie I'm wearing right now is older than this franchise. You know what I mean? So like, and it'll probably last, and it's still in good shape. But no, it's too soon for any of that talk. And I mean, so you either continue it or you have to do more Fantastic Beasts films or something like that.
I guess
I would say this: if they're going to do some sort of continuation of Cursed Child, or if they're going to do another Harry Potter movie, they're going to have to plan it out. Like actually, like maybe write out 2 or 3 scripts, write out a trilogy, and then take it over time, and then figure out how they're going to get those actors back, like a dump truck full of money, like a ridiculous amount of money, like, because you just know that Daniel Radcliffe doesn't want to do it anymore. Like you feel like Rupert Grint would be like, sign me up. When are we going?
I've been waiting. I'm still scared of spiders. I can still.
I thought we were. I thought we were doing up in the 9th film last year. You know what I mean? And Emma Watson, her quota would be high, but I think the real tough one to get will be Radcliffe, because of the fact that he's very much just doing his own thing now, and I think he's trying to very much be away from this franchise as much as possible. Given his comments also about Shishi, not be named as well.
Right.
So,
Yeah, exactly.
It brings sort of an interesting circle of life.
Yeah, I could see HBO Max doing something like what Amazon is doing with Lord of the Rings, which is having sort of a series set in that world, but not overlapping with the with the actual film franchise. I could see something like that happen down the line, perhaps. But how would that pick up from after these movies, or would it be set in a different period entirely? Who the hell knows?
We'll never know.
Oh, I'm pretty sure we'll know in about 5 years. I'm sure something like that happens.
Due to this pandemic, we will know, because every IP that you ever have experienced in your life that made money will come back into your life, and you all see it because you all missed the theater, and small films will die, which is sad. So what a note to end on.
Yeah, no, seriously. Ryan McQuade, can you tell people where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and on Instagram at Ryan McQuade77. Like I said, you can find my work over at InSessionFilm.com and then over at Awards Watch, Awards Radar, Film Speak, just in, various other places that I'm guesting on. And thank you, Robert, so much again for having me on. I love this. I'm glad that this cursed episode is going to be done. It's going to be released. And now the curse is gone. And we can all, watch our kids go off to Hogwarts.
Exactly. And I think it sounds like we're going to have to bring you back on here to talk about Lord of the Rings, though, at some point. So we'll have to figure out how to make that work. Would you make me talk about the Hobbit films as well, or can we just focus on the legit Rings trilogy?
We shall see.
Oh boy! All right, to be continued, folks.
What a tease!
All right. Thank you, Ryan, for coming on. This is a blast.
Thank you so much, sir.
This has been a production of CrookedTable.com. All rights reserved.
Z-R-O-O-K-E-D.